Who knows what else could have happened in the evolution of the human brain and of the human psyche if the phenomenon of the anxiety electromagnetic brain emission had not appeared millions of years ago. Most likely, the human species would have not appeared at all, and consequently, no human civilization, the civilization of thought and symbol. The fear as anxiety put the human brain in a state of constant activation, in a state of increased energy. And this energy could be used to produce something unprecedented in the nature, to produce concepts and symbols. At the same time, the appearance of the symbolism was not such a breakthrough as the appearance of the anxiety. It's the fear as anxiety that is a turning point in the history of life on Earth. This is where the essence of symbolism of the brain work lies. The anxiety was the first symbol produced ever by the brain as a whole. A mystery that we will never get to know, and the question will remain forever of where the impulse to carry the brain of the prehuman apes to a higher energy level came from. Was it a mysterious mutation that triggered the genetic clock in the brain neurons, a clock that coupled all neurons to the same and simultaneous electromagnetic emission, at the beginning still a senseless emission, just as the anxiety is senseless, then the emission which is coordinated, coupled, perfectly united, making of the entire brain one indivisible instrument, an instrument to emit a ceaseless symbol of the anxiety, and of all the symbols without an end, which is thinking. We don't know, and we will never know how it happened, but it's good that at least we name what happened then, because it was when the first code continuously emitted by the brain of the prehuman apes appeared, the first symbolic code, the anxiety code. Then the learning of symbolic coding by the brain began. No longer the monkey brain, but the human one. And the primitive man, just like the modern one, modifies and extends already in the early childhood the single code anxiety emission to the infinite code emission of thinking. Physiologically, every person born with a genetically triggered anxiety emission will learn to modify this brain emission from the very beginning of his individual life so that it can mean more and more symbolic concepts instead of the anxiety single code emission. Our brain learns to emit electromagnetic waves in such a way so that the waves that arise are not accidental but are carriers of the precisely encoded symbols, thoughts, words, feelings. The attentive listener may have noticed that I use the concepts of thoughts and words as separate concepts. It's worth explaining this. Words are evolutionarily a secondary concept to the thoughts. It's not difficult to see that our thoughts are not produced by the brain with words at all. The words come later in the process of putting thoughts into words. So what are thoughts if they are not originally words? Here we come to another proof that thoughts are not born in specific substructures of the brain, but are the result of the electromagnetic emissions of the whole brain. Our thought At the very beginning, in a way that cannot be easily described, includes all possible brain perceptions. In the thoughts, there are images, sensations, the taste, the touch, the sound, and the smell. In a word, all possible brain functions. That's why thoughts have always been considered as something elusive, because by focusing on one aspect of them, we neglect many others. But such a vagueness of the thoughts, its functionality in the areas of all brain senses, clearly proves that the whole brain is involved in their formation. The crowning proof that the whole brain box is the author of the thoughts and feelings, the whole indivisible brain. So when do words appear in the thinking process? Evolutionarily speaking, it was only after the primer primitive man learned to code the first symbols with the help of the brain emissions, so precisely that a symbolic exchange with the environment could take place. Such an exchange could take place only when spontaneous shouts and sounds emitted by the people became strictly codified shouts and sounds emissions ascribed to the corresponding concepts, became their symbols. The words were created for the purpose of communication with the environment. But thinking was long before that, and words are actually produced in well-defined substructures of the brain. But thoughts are not born there. These are only places where our thoughts are translated into the language of communication with the environment, into words. We all know very well that we do not need to use these translator of thoughts when we think, that is, when we talk to ourselves. We do not think with words. Neurology has already recognized the places where the thoughts are translated into the words. These are the areas of the brain responsible for the speaking and the understanding of the speech. Any damage of them makes it impossible to translate the thoughts into the words, but thinking goes on unhindered. This is the third proof that thinking is not a product of the brain substructures, but the effect of the electromagnetic emissions of the entire brain. The path of the symbolic exchange with the environment is as follows. The first stop, the whole brain in a precise electromagnetic wave emission is generating a thought. Second step, there come the brain substructures responsible for translating of the thoughts into the speech. The third step, the speech regions flatten the thought to the dimension of the words. Fourth step, the larynx and the mouth generate the sonic form of the words. Fifth step, the second communicator receives the sound from the words with the aid of the hearing organ, which transforms the sound form of the words into the form of an electromagnetic impulse. The sixth step, the brain areas of the hearing and speech comprehension, that's the substructures of the brain responsible for translating words into thoughts, translate the electromagnetic impulse that encodes the words into thoughts. And the seventh step, the whole brain generates a thought in response to the received message of the symbolic exchange with the environment. This is how we prove that the anxiety and thoughts are actually the same. Thoughts are, evolutionarily speaking, a new form of anxiety. The mechanism of their formation is almost identical, Both are due to the electromagnetic wave emissions of the brain as a whole. The most important difference between the anxiety and the thought is that the brain anxiety emissions happen spontaneously and unknowingly.